And 3, 2, 1. Welcome to The Peaceful Truth, the podcast where we talk about everything from women empowerment, feminism, and everything in between. You are joined by your host, Kenzie. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for yet another week of The Peaceful Truth. I wanted to first address why there wasn't an episode last week. I've decided to move the podcast to every other week. I felt like I was kind of burning the candle at both ends. I am a one-man band with this podcast, which means I produce, set up, I'm the whole production team, and then I edit, and I'm the post-production team of uploading it. So I'm just the whole system over here, and I just felt like I was burning the candle at both ends. So I've decided to do it every other week, but I still am so interested in the podcast, still so excited about it, still love to do it, and it still makes me happy. So I'm not done doing it. I think I just needed more time to dedicate to other things, as well as make this podcast even better with that in between time. So it will be every other Thursday, and I appreciate your patience with that and there not being an episode last week. But this week, guess what I'm talking about yet again? The Bachelorette. So I know I talk about this a lot, and I'm sorry if you don't watch and you're like, no, yet another week. But I just thought this season was important to talk about. I went into this season thinking that I would address maybe some things that went wrong with like female empowerment and women empowerment. And I thought I was going to be able to pick up on that. And I also wasn't like very excited about Hannah at the beginning and was vocal about that. But I have to say that I have nothing negative to say about things that went wrong with feminism, as well as Hannah is my favorite Bachelorette easily of all time. I have really just fallen in love with the transformation that she had on this show. And I think it's one of the most visible progression and maturity of someone that you've seen on a show before. And I cannot speak more highly of her. I think she's a great role model. I think she's a great woman, and I think she's someone to be admired. And I'm just obsessed. So I'm going to talk about Hannah's transformation tonight. So I wanted to start chronologically. She started off as one of the women on Colton's season for The Bachelor. So at the start of this Bachelor season, this previous Bachelor season that she was on, she was involved with some drama with a fellow woman from the pageant world, which is Kaylin. Hannah Brown was a pageant woman for Alabama, but I don't know what state Kaylin was for. So it kind of, the way the show was edited, at least, it wasn't a great look for Hannah B. It kind of was like the opposite of feminism. It just kind of seemed like she was ragging on this other girl there, and it just wasn't a great look, and it seemed drama-filled. So that was like the main reason I think I was kind of hesitant on Hannah becoming the Bachelor, that past reason. She also wasn't very great at making toast. There's an iconic scene with her and Colton and that first date with them alone, and she just like fumbled through her speech. But that was the beginning, and that was that season. It was sad to watch her be brokenhearted because I felt like Colton didn't handle that very well. So then we go into The Bachelorette. She's announced The Bachelorette at the beginning, where they did her first like rose ceremony, or her first introduction of her suitors was like on camera right after the Bachelor season wrapped. And during that, she really couldn't make a speech, and it was kind of awkward, and it was a little painful. She was also awkward when the men were coming out of the limo. She didn't seem super self-confident. It wasn't present. And, but I do feel like that initial start to how the season began was very relatable, because you know that Hannah's super real. So that part was good. But I also felt like at the beginning of her season of The Bachelorette, she also depended on some reassurance. For example, on the first night of the show, she gave the first impression rose to Luke, who ends up being a villain, because he gave her that rose and reassured her and acted like he was there for her. And she took a lot of value in that, which I'm not saying it's bad to value that, but I'm just saying that she depended on that reassurance. And it just seems like she's become a more self-aware person where she feels less fueled by anxiety based on other people. And she just seems very strong in that. So let's talk a little bit about her transformation. She became very eloquent, and she, both in how she spoke and both in how she interacted with other people. Not that I felt like she was awful with other people before, but she just shows this emotional maturity where she shows people grace and respect. For example, you're going to have to know a lot of context if you're listening to this episode, first of all. In her breakup with Jed, one of the leads toward the end of the show, she never ridiculed him for his behavior. He went on the show with a girlfriend. He lied to the girlfriend and handled it poorly after and never told Hannah. And it really screwed her over for making a good decision on who she wanted to keep and stay, and kind of hindered her progress in developing other relationships. But I feel like she wasn't mean to Jed. She never ridiculed him. She showed him forgiveness. She stuck up for him when the audience, or for their relationship, when the audience started to clap and pointed out, no, this is sad that we broke up and it shouldn't be something to applaud about. And she spoke out about that and had bravery. I don't know if a room started to clap around me on live television, if I'd be able to say, no, stop. It's not something to clap about. You just showed, like, all of this showed how her confidence grew. Not only that, but she was eloquent about religion. She spoke out that God still loves her even though she has sex. She talked about grace, and she discussed about worshiping in her own way. And I just felt like that was very powerful, that she was strong enough to stick up for how she was going to worship. So then she ends up speaking out for herself and against people who were trying to shame her. I've discussed this before in the episode where I did about Luke and his sex shaming tactics, but I'll kind of dive into that very briefly. So Luke is this guy who claims to be very religious and is very by the book in that, in the fact that he believes, like, based on what the Bible says, like, the man should be the leader of the household. Based on what the Bible said, you shouldn't have sex before marriage. So he had a lot of shame with that religion that he was trying to project onto other people. So there was a lot of moments that he did that, but when he was leaving in the limo, when she broke up with him and realized how mean and backwards he was being toward her, she confidently says that she is sexually active. She also says no confidently when he asks to pray over her for after she confesses that she did have sex. And then when he came uninvited to that rose ceremony, she told him to leave and the reasons why she wanted him to leave, and saying that there's no possibility, blatantly saying no. And then when he doesn't, like, realize that he's going against her consent, she calls him out for it and says, "You're not taking no for an answer." And she moves the rose stand away from him, which is iconic. She's a queen. And then with Jed, when she ends up breaking up with him, this is where she speaks out for herself during the Jed interaction. She said, "This is not what I signed up for." She was confident in herself and her decision, even when Jed was lying and making something that he was lying about seem less prevalent, which I think proves that she knows herself even more and she can make those decisions and she can talk out against that. So I just thought she was a great example for society and how it's shifting. And I thought that this was like a great timepiece of this season, was a great timepiece. And I fell in love with the show even more because it really just showed the shift in what's happening in society. I feel like there's a lot of shifts that were displayed. For example, religion in society. I feel like religion has been used to shape morals. And in the past, some of that was with shame because it was sinful to do something. But I feel like society's views on sex and gender roles are shifting. And Luke, the villain on the show of her season, had that old school view on men and literally said, as in the Bible, and using the Bible as a tool to shame those who have had sex. But Hannah, in her transformation, she's an ultimate protagonist. She shows how she uses religion and worship and what it means to her. And the way her relationship is with religion is how I think that religion could change with society and progress with society. She's progressive in both her gender roles as well as sex and people's gender identity because she supports her friend Demi, who has said that she's not necessarily defined as being straight. She also says that she acts through grace, and I feel like it's very woke of her to act in grace because it's like showing people forgiveness and showing people love and being above that negativity that society projects onto you. She just shows forgiveness and is the most meditative version of religion and Christianity. And she also has her own relationship with God and interprets religion in a different way. And I think that it could be a reflection on how things are going. I also wanted to talk about like sex and society. I feel like sex used and still can be and still is obviously changing, but it used to be very shameful, I feel like, in society for a woman to embrace her sexuality. But Hannah shows the recent shift in the feminist movement by standing up for who she is confidently and without shame. And I feel like her sticking up for herself and proudly saying that she has sex and proudly saying no to Luke and sticking up for herself and in turn all of women for women being sexual beings, she is literally just showing that time is up. And it's amazing and it's refreshing. Tyler, who was the runner-up in a fan favorite, I can't believe it took me this long to talk about him, but Tyler also displays like a woke man and how men need to shift in their own thoughts of women. I feel like he was respectful and he doesn't see her as like just an object. He's her cheerleader in her career and her life choices and doesn't shame her but celebrates those decisions. And it's just such a juxtaposition to Luke, who represents what society used to be in the past. And I feel like Tyler represents the future. And I feel like that's why he was such a fan favorite, because he's refreshing. Like, that's what I feel like women nowadays, when we're saying time's up, this is like how we hope men to evolve. And he was displaying that and just showing that in his actions. And it was just refreshing to see. And this season was so great because usually seasons end where they end up with someone and then either they break up with them a few months later or they end up getting married. But this season, Hannah falls in love with herself. And Hannah ends up with herself. And Hannah ends up being like this badass woman and becoming in a place of confidence so that eventually she chooses to be in a relationship and she's secure in that relationship because she knows she's good with herself. And I just feel like that is such a cool thing to witness and a wonderful thing to see. And I just feel like her transformation is great. So I just wanted to talk about her. And then this week, what am I looking forward to? So every week I always like to wrap the episode up with what I'm looking forward to. I guess this week is the second 100-mile bike ride that I'm going to do in my life. And I'm excited for it. It's going to be really hard. I hope that I did some of this podcast justice this episode. I'm so tired after riding 80, but the other day for training, but that is what I'm looking forward to. It's something that I think is fun to do and I'm passionate about. But I really appreciate you all tuning in for yet another episode of The Peaceful Truth. We'll be back every other Thursday. And so please tune in to the following Thursday. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your week. Bye.